thank you all for being here today, and we really appreciate it. My name is Don Poe. I'm president of the Hood County Tea Party, and we're just extremely pleased for our crowd tonight. We've got a wonderful speaker, young man we've gotten acquainted with some time ago, and I think you're going to really enjoy what he's going to talk about tonight. It's very timely. At this time, we're going to call the meeting to order, and we'd like to recognize all the veterans that are in the audience. Would you please stand? And at this time, I want to get Maurice, if he would come up and lead us in our prayer.
Let us pray. Merciful Father, we come tonight giving you praises. And thank you, Father, for the blessings that you have given us. Father, we thank you for the two decisions that came down today. We know that it's done because of your will, Father. Father, we ask that you help us to persevere and to keep pushing for the right thing, Father. Father, we know we can get there if we just keep our trust in you, if we just continue to do the things that you would have us to do. Father, let us remember to love one another, to respect each other. And Father, let us remember not to attack anybody personally, even though they might be of a different persuasion than we are, but we're still all one people and we need to work together, and we're all one in Christ. Father, we ask that you just bless the tea parties all over the United States. We ask you bless the United States of America. We ask that you protect our troops from harm wherever they are and return them safely home. Father, we ask these blessings in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Marie. I'm going to do something a little bit different today. Don't sit down if you like for a few minutes. How many of you would remember Red Skelton?
Who doesn't know who he is?
You lucky rascal. I don't know when y'all saw this. This was in the paper the other day. And it says, God bless Red Skelton.
Amen.
And I read that and I clipped it and I said, you know what? We should do this at our Tea Party meeting. Because as this teacher said, that it looked like that the people that they recite the pledge every day and they just cite it by rote and go through it. But Red Skelton, he did it a little bit different. So I'm going to read what they had in the paper there the other day, and it starts out with I, which means me, an individual, a committee of one. Pledge, dedicate all my worldly goods to give up without self-pity. Allegiance, my love and my devotion to the flag, our standard, Old Glory, a symbol of freedom. Wherever she waves, there is respect, because your loyalty has given her a dignity that shouts, freedom is everybody's job. I'll be united. That means that we have all come together. States of America, individual communities that have united into 48 great states. And you see how that's dated. Now we're at 50. Or is it 56? Isn't that what the wrong So, in community, pride and dignity and purpose, all divided into imaginary boundaries, and yet united to a common purpose, and that is love of country. And I tell you what, you see that in our veterans, the love of country. And to the republic, a state in which sovereign power is invested in representatives chosen by the people to govern. And government is the people, and it's from the people to the leaders, not from the leaders to the people. For which it stands, one nation meaning so blessed by God, indivisible, incapable of being divided, with liberty, which is freedom, the right or power to live one's own life without threats, fear, or some sort of retaliation. And justice, the principle or qualities of dealing fairly with others for all. For all means, which means boys and girls, it's as much your country as it is mine. Isn't that great? And now if y'all will stand, and we'll have the pledge.
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. We have, and if I've overlooked somebody, please let me know. But we have Peyton Downing with us tonight, and she's with the Abbott campaign. She's going to come up and say a few words for us.
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
How are we doing this afternoon? All right, so my name is Peyton Downing. This is my third week as an intern on the Greg Abbott campaign. I'm super stoked. So right now what we're doing is getting a basis for how many people will be voting for Abbott. So I have this wonderful little clipboard and a sign-up sheet. And if you're voting for Abbott, I'm going to pass it around, and I'd like you to put your name and your address. That's how we identify voters. I also have 7 Abbott car stickers. Now these car stickers come with a price. It's not monetary, so don't reach for your checkbooks at once, please. I have to take a picture of you putting your car sticker on your car and then post it on social media. Because I've been trying to do this for 3 weeks, I haven't gotten one. So I will have these, and after the meeting, I'll be right at the door. If you want a car sticker, please come talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Peyton. We've got some upcoming events. Get Reed to come over and help me with this. The one we want to talk about first is our 4th of July parade. I want to ask for your assistance. We want you to participate in the 4th of July parade. We're going to have, Don, you come up too. Don's got a big step van that he used in the parade last year, and he decorates it with flags and banners and music and so on. Did a fantastic job. And so what we're looking for are people that would like to participate in it. If you'd like to be in the parade, then we want to know that you want to be in the parade and come be with us. We're going to have, I think, 6, maybe 7 golf carts that are going to be decorated. Now, I will tell you, 2 years ago, I walked the whole parade route carrying a flag. Now, that is from the high school down around the square and back to the high school. Now, I'm 75, and that's a long walk for me, and I do a lot of walking. So we're going to bring golf carts. We did last year, had a blast, so we decorated the golf carts, and it's fun. Now, what we need is we've got some of the guys that have pickups and trailers. I don't have a pickup and trailer. I'm needing assistance in that area. If any of you have a pickup and a trailer that you can pick up a golf cart early on Friday morning, which is where the 4th and the parade is going to be, and take it up to the staging ground, which is at the high school. If you'll please let us know if you're willing to do that, we really would appreciate it. And if you want to ride on the golf cart, that'd be great. If you'll drive on the golf cart, you can drive mine. So it'll be fun. It'll be interesting. We'll have walkers and so on. Don, you got anything to say there?
How many people have actually been in a parade, actually participated? That's great. I'll tell you what, it is a blast. And I don't know about you guys, but when I was driving, we call my van Casper because it's all white until we decorate it. We're driving down through this wall of people, a tunnel of people. I couldn't believe how exhilarating this thing was. Remember, Irvin? It was just incredible, and I highly recommend being involved. It is really a neat thing to do. And when you have 25,000 people clapping at you and thumbs up and we're playing music, it's pretty neat.
The state.
Yes, sir.
I've got to pick up my trailer. If you'll drive them, you haul mine and yours both.
Okay, all right, I'll try. You bet.
So do it. Pick up Thursday evening. And
Okay.
trailer.
Okay. That's good, thank you. Anybody else? Ken, just let us know, Don or myself or any of the guys in the, up here at the front there, so we can get your name and phone number. But, you know, it's so much fun. What we do with Casper is we actually have 3 of these big banners here. And we have a banner on each side of the truck, plus we have a group of people that are walking and carrying that banner. And we have people carrying our big flags, our Texas flag and our U.S. flag. So, for the ones of you that don't know, this flag flew over the Capitol in D.C. And this flag flew over the Capitol in Austin. So we're real proud of our flags. So when we carry these flags, and we're really proud of them. We're proud of our members, we're proud of the participation. So we would encourage all of you, if you want to participate, please come and do it. It'd be great. You'll get more fun out of it. It'll be more fun for you than you could ever realize. Okay, Green? We get up there, well, you're not gonna believe this, but I got up there with the first golf cart last year, 5:30. Yes, because I had to make several trips. And the first golf cart that I dropped off at school to go back to get the second one, you will not believe this, but there was people already on the sides of the street, Pearl Street, all the way out to the school. Right? Right? All the way out to the school, all the way downtown, getting themselves ready for the parade, which is gonna come along about what? 10, 11 o'clock, something like that. We couldn't believe it. We absolutely could not believe that many people were out there that early. So I got home, I told Rena about it. I said, tell these people, how many people are already there? You know, so they're really excited. Largest parade I think they've ever had here in Pickett County in Grand Prairie. So it's fun.
What time?
The parade starts at 10, I believe.
What time do we be at the stadium, at the high school?
It could be there like 8 or 8:30 is fine.
We
One other thing.
might want to
Let me-
elaborate since they're asking, Reed. Tell them where we end up meeting at 8 o'clock. The staging area is on this side of the high school.
Well, it's actually kind of behind it, isn't it?
Well, no, remember it was on where we put our stuff, parked the trailers and the cars.
Yeah.
Is on this side.
Yeah.
So you might want
But we
to,
have to go around there.
but then we go around to the other, to look back behind where the the
Yeah,
west
it's a
side.
big parking area back behind the high school, if you're familiar with it, okay? That's where we actually wind up, but the trailers, a lot of them are left this side of the school. Well, that makes no sense, but that's the way it is. But what we have to do is when we get there, we have to get the vehicles ready, because if you put all the flags and bunnies and such like on your golf cart and drive with it, you know, it's gone. So we have to stay and get them ready when we get there.
Okay. We were at the Republican convention. Who else was there? Wonderful. And we met lots of the candidates, and I want to, the Tea Party as a whole does not support candidates. But I think when when you go out and you meet a good candidate, I think it's good to share that knowledge with like-minded people. Now, many of you know that Joe Strauss is our Speaker of the House in Austin. And many of you also know that Jim Keffer, our state representative, is his buddy. We met Scott Turner. He is wonderful. I just love this young man. I encourage you to call Jim Keffer's office and ask him to vote for this guy. Now, it may be a waste of time, but if you don't do that, then he's thinking, well, he knows we don't approve of him voting for Joe Strauss. He told us right here. But I really encourage you to call Jim Keffer's office. Let him know that you're not satisfied with our Speaker of the House and we want we want you to take a look at Scott Turner. He's really a good guy. Also, I have some cards up here. I know you all have seen them laying around. We've never really talked about them much. They're little postcards. And we really like, part of our mission in the Hood County Tea Party is to educate our community. And we really want to get everybody informed. So please take some of these cards, drop it to a friend or neighbor, and you might want to just put our address on here because we will be meeting here from now on. So just invite them to come. And next month, we're real excited about this following you, Wade. We're going to have someone from the Texas Volunteer Border Patrol. Now that ought to be very, very exciting, especially with what's going on, I mean, period, but what's going on now. So take some of these, they're over there, and invite your friends and neighbors to come. You don't even have to sign it if you don't want to, but sometimes you're a good influence. If they think you like it, then they'll be more likely to come, but if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. So I want to talk to you about that. And I'm now talking to you about next month. So, I guess I'm done. Okay, thank you.
Only for the,
Yeah.
there's some people we want to recognize that are with us tonight. We have Katie Lane, and she's actually videoing for us. You know, she's newly elected. We're real proud of Katie. She did a fantastic job. She had a little assistance from her husband. Not much. And that is Mike Lane, and he's our constable where we live. And we also have a newly elected JP, and that's Cash Gwynn, sitting right over there. And we want all of you to know how proud we are of you. You're great candidates, and who am I missing? Oh, Butch.
Oh,
This is the guy I've known for years and years and years. Big as a house, how can I miss him? Stand up, Butch. And he's the newly elected commissioner. And so we're real proud of these candidates. They did a fantastic job running the campaigns, getting elected. And we will be visiting them in their courts. And
can I say something?
Sure.
I just want to tell you about a workshop that some of us, Patricia and Marty, I think, attended in Austin. And the topic was, it's all local. We are so proud to have these people who are part of our Tea Party in these local offices. We have got to look for more good candidates to put in these local offices, because you realize that a lot of these people go to Austin. So then they go to Washington. So we've got to get really conservative people. On the local level, we can make a difference here. So, thank you.
One other thing I want to bring up, the school board, one of our favorite topics around here. We went to their meeting, what was it, last week, wasn't it? Anyway, they were talking about the superintendent, and they gave him a raise and extended his contract. Now, what I said to the school board president, which is an old friend of ours, in fact, we worked in his campaign to help him get elected the first time, probably the second time, and whatever, is I'd rather see the money go to the teachers.
Amen.
Yeah. That was my feeling. What I was seeing from that advertisement, well, not advertisement, but that article in the paper here several weeks ago, that a lot of the teachers make $60,000 a year, and the superintendent was making $191,000. And so I asked him, my question to him was, do you think the superintendent is worth 3+ teachers? And he said, oh, yeah. And I said, I don't think so. You know, I think $191,000 is plenty of money, you know, for our our school system. I know it's a good school system, and I think this guy's doing a good job. You know, I have no problem with that, but I do have a problem with the other. So what I'm saying all this is to encourage you, if you will, excuse me, is to go to the school board meetings and sit in there. We asked if we could speak, and they said, yes, all you have to do is fill out this sheet of paper that's on the table when you come in. And I said, and which sheet of paper are you talking about? Because I was looking at them. And she says, well, I'll make sure that they're there next time. So, you know, and I think she will. You know, I think she will. I think it was just an oversight. But a lot of things can be an oversight. You know, a lot of things can be an oversight. And it seems that we made them a little bit uncomfortable. Now, they did, a lot of them come out and talk to us after their meeting was over with. Even the superintendent saying he was glad we were there, and we were there in force. And the Roger Enlow, he's the publisher, he's the editor of the Hood County News, was sitting right in front of us, and he was telling us how glad he was to see us there. So it does make a difference if you suit up and show up. So we would encourage you to do that. Butch will tell you, when he's on the commissioner's court, he would like to see you in the audience when the commissioners meet. City council, some of us live out in the country, so the city council kind of sort of doesn't affect us too much, but it kind of sort of does.
Yeah.
But we go, and we know these guys, so we're just encouraging you to, if you can, find out when the meetings are, and go to them if you can.
I'll let them know.
And, you know, just be, and if you've got a Tea Party badge, wear it with your name. Let them know who you are and what you stand for. Because they like to see that. Surprisingly, they like to see that. There's some of them, especially on these different boards, they like to see you sitting out there. But anyway, that's me off on a rant. But at this time, I'm going to ask Don Meisinger to come up. He's got something he's going to share with us. And then we're going to get to this young man over here.
Thank you, Don. He asked the guy with the worst doggone voice in the joint to do this. But since what we're talking about is immigration, this was kind of an interesting article, and Don wanted me to read it. And it's kind of reversing the situation of what if. And the question is, Mr. President, I'm planning to move my family and extended family into Mexico for my health. Now I'd like to ask you to assist me. We're planning a simple walk across the border from the U.S. into Mexico, and we'll need your help to make a few arrangements. We plan to skip all the legal stuff like visas, passports, immigration quotas, and laws. I'm sure they handle those things the same way you do here. So would you mind telling your buddy, the President of Mexico, that I'm on my way over? Please let him know that I will be expecting the following. Number 1, free medical care for my entire family. Number 2, English-speaking government bureaucrats for all services I might need, whether I use them or not. Number 3, please print all Mexican government forms in English. That would be most helpful. Number 4, I want my grandkids to be taught Spanish by English-speaking bilingual teachers. Number 5, tell their schools they need to include classes on American culture and history. Number 6, I want my grandkids to see the American flag on one of the flagpoles at their school. Please plan to feed my grandkids at school for both breakfast and lunch. Number 8, I will need a local Mexican driver's license so I can get easy access to government services. Number 9, I do plan to get a car and drive to Mexico, but I don't plan to purchase car insurance, and I probably won't make any special effort to learn local traffic laws. 10, in case one of the Mexican police officers does not get the memo from their president to leave me alone, please be sure that every patrol car has at least one English-speaking officer. 11, I plan to fly the U.S. flag from my house top, put U.S. flag decals on my car, and have a gigantic celebration on July 4th. I do not want any complaints or negative comments from the locals. 12, I would also like to have a nice job without paying any taxes or have any labor or tax laws enforced on any business I may start. 13, please have the president tell all the Mexican people to be extremely nice and never say critical things about me or my family, or about the strain we might place on their economy. 14, I want to receive free food stamps. 15, naturally, I'll expect free rent subsidies. 16, I'll need income tax credits so that although I don't pay Mexican taxes, I'll receive money from the government. 17, please arrange it so that the Mexican government pays $4,500 to help me buy a new car. Hey, wouldn't that be great? I'm looking forward to that. 18, oh yes, I almost forgot. Please enroll me free in Mexican Social Security program so that I'll get a monthly income in retirement. I know this is an easy request because you already do all these things for all of his people who walk over to the U.S. from Mexico. I'm sure that the President of Mexico won't mind returning the favor if you ask him nicely. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don.
What's the name of that? What did we Google to get
I
that?
forget where I saw it. It was online or something.
I-
Where'd you get it?
One of my neighbors got it and came out and handed it to me. And I read it and I said, I need a copy of that for the next one. So I knew we had this young man coming tonight.
You know where
I want a copy of it, I'm gonna put it on Facebook.
All right, why don't I let you take it with you
Absolutely.
and then just cycle it around? And if you get a copy of it, well, that'd be great. Randy?
Type it up. I feel very privileged to have this young man here tonight. I met Wade, gee, I don't know when, it's been a long time. And he made a special trip to Granbury to teach us some class. I forgot now what it was, Wade, but he's with the Heritage Action Group. And let me get my notes up here. And they're a great group, so, you know, what we want to, oh, by the way, could you pass the basket? We'll give Wade some money tonight, and we'll donate it to your group. And, okay, a little bit about Wade. This is the one thing I love a lot about Wade, is he served in the U.S. Marine Corps, and you were in Iraq, or Iraq. So, I'm proud of you for that. Very proud, thank you. Wade started, after he got out of the Marine Corps, he came to Texas for college and started in the conservative movement by completing several internships, including at the Heritage Foundation. Wade joined Heritage Action to help conservatives hold their members of Congress accountable. Isn't that interesting? Good for you, Wade. Wade is, he always stands by to help us, so if y'all have any questions, you want some policy issues explained to you, I know he'll be glad to do that, but I'm not going to talk anymore, I'm just going to let you hear Wade.
Thank you very much for having me. I do appreciate it. I cannot accept any money if our job is to provide resources to activists, not to be taking resources away. So please use this for your group or whatever. So my name is Joseph Wade Miller. I'm with the Heritage Action for America. For those of you who are not familiar, the Heritage Foundation is a think tank in Washington, D.C., started by, amongst others, Dr. Edwin J. Fulner, who before that had started the Republican Study Committee. And they saw a need in D.C. for timely, quick policy analysis in order to equip conservative members of Congress with the data and information they need so they can vote the right way. So this worked. This was a great model. It still is a great model. They worked hand in hand with the Reagan administration during the very first cabinet meeting that Ronald Reagan had. They passed out the Mandate for Leadership. This was a document that was used. Ronald Reagan put it in front of his cabinet members and said, "This is our path forward. Get this done." They got about 65 to 70% of those policies enacted over his first year and a half, and I think that things did pretty good. I think that we saw a lot of positive economic growth, and that kind of catapulted Heritage Foundation to one of the premier think tank statuses. That worked for a long time. Where we saw that this was no longer as effective as it could be was really during the Obamacare debates. And I'm going to get into immigration, I'm just kind of giving you a background on what I do. When we saw Obamacare, what happened was we got pummeled in the halls of Congress. Every single lobbyist out there was walking the halls, every single special interest group was walking the halls, basically promising votes and support and money if you pass this. We will support you on Obamacare if you give us this exemption, if you give us this carve-out, if you give our pharmacy special cutouts and exemptions. Just every single special interest you could think of was getting their hands in taxpayers' pockets in order to throw their support behind Obamacare. The conservative movement just did not have an answer to that. We could not produce policy analysis fast enough and disseminate it to activists fast enough for them to push back and kind of counter the huge amount of money that went into that. And so we really got our butts kicked on Obamacare. Heritage Action kind of came about on the back end of this. They realized that there was a need for a conservative lobbying group who was really not so much lobbyists, because we kind of consider ourselves anti-lobbyist lobbyists. We want to stop all the other lobbyists from getting their way. But technically you could say that we are community organizers or lobbyists or whatever. I consider myself a conservative who loves working with grassroots groups, tea parties, conservative constitutional groups to make sure that they have the information that they need in order to hold their members of Congress accountable. So to that end, we actually have some scorecards, and I'm going to actually pass these out real quick. If you'll pass these down the line. And this is really our chief method of accountability. We analyze legislation that's going in front of our members of Congress that they're going to vote on, and then we work with our activists to make sure that they have the talking points they need, to make sure that if they're going to go into a meeting with their member of Congress, that they actually know more about that legislation than their staffers or their members of Congress do. And for those activists we work with, we call them sentinels. Those sentinels who have been with us a year or longer, they actually need very little coaching. They naturally now, just through their involvement with us, know way more about policy than congressional staffers. And I love to see that. When you have a group of 4 or 5 Tea Party activists going in and correcting members of Congress on little minute details about legislation and bills, it really puts members of Congress on the defensive, and it makes them want to basically work with the grassroots a little bit closer and to kind of open up and have that dialogue going. So this is our conservative rating. Ted Cruz currently has a 97 or 98%. We've only disagreed with him on one vote, and that was a water resources bill in which they were using it to kind of funnel earmarks into. I know a lot of the Cruz staffers are friends of mine, and I tease them about this a lot. To this day, I still may, kind of jab them a little bit when we go have pizza and maybe a beer every once in a while. But we get along great, and Senator Cruz is, I think, has the second highest. Mike Lee currently has a 100% on our scorecard. But they are really knocking it out of the park. They're conservative all-stars. They're up there fighting every day for conservative principles and legislation. And we use this scorecard in order to inform voters. You can actually go online and look at your member of Congress, click on his name or her name, and it will show you the votes we key voted and why, and then it'll give you an explanation of whether their vote was good or bad, and so on and so forth. We don't key vote issues where there might be more than one legitimate conservative opinion. So we try to stay away from, if there was a vote, do you like the fair tax or the flat tax? We're not going to get involved in that, because there's a lot of conservatives on both sides of that issue. We only key vote issues where there's a clear conservative principle at play. That way it is indisputable, or at least to a relatively high degree indisputable, that our scorecard is relatively accurate in engaging how conservative their voting record is. Now, we consider anything above 90% to be rock solid. We're not going to kind of split hairs. It is okay for conservatives to disagree sometimes. So we think that if you're above a 90%, then you're effectively, in our eyes, from a conservative standpoint, at 100%. Anyone above that threshold or near it is doing a relatively good job. When you get down, especially in Texas districts, when you get down into the 70s, 60s, and especially like 50s, that's where we need to start having a conversation. That doesn't mean that they're not conservative. It may mean that they're just not understanding the policy legislation that they're voting on. They may not be reading it in some instances, where I know that is an absolute fact. A really good example of that was the Children's Medical Hospital Bill, where a lot of people voted for it because it had the worst children in the hospital in it. If they had bothered reading it, they would have known that this was money that was not being used by the hospital. The hospital says we don't need this money. And Obama even identified it as a place where we could cut spending. Now, when the president is offering to cut $300 million in spending and Republicans aren't taking him up on that, unless it's in the defense industry on a vital defense program, I don't understand the logic of those type of votes. So those are the things we keep an eye on. We also have a blog where we keep people up to date, and a Monday phone call where we talk about all the legislation that we're dealing with. So that's kind of a real brief rundown of what I do and what we do. I cover all of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and parts of Louisiana. I'm actually based in Arlington. It's only about an hour from here, not too far. And by the way, I've driven through and around, but I've never actually been down here. It's a beautiful town. I'm not trying to pander to the audience either. It really is. It's a very scenic kind of Texas town. I love it. Anyways, so I'm going to move on now to immigration. Now, I never get to do the same spiel ever, hardly. So sometimes it doesn't go as smoothly as I would like because I jump on topics on a daily and weekly basis. And once something's voted on, it's in the past, I move on to the next. Maybe it's unemployment insurance, maybe it's Export-Import Bank. And so I really have to spend a lot of time, significant amount of time, understanding legislation and the talking points and the conservative perspective on it. So if I kind of go into circular logic here every once in a while, just bear with me. So immigration, I will start out with some data points, and then we can kind of put that in context of why that's important. As of the 2010 census, there was about 3.5 million illegal households. That was obviously in 2010, it's probably considerably higher than that, and even that number is probably a conservative estimate. It's probably north of that significantly by now, at the very least. Illegals do not qualify for direct benefits. So if you're an illegal alien and you are not committing Social Security fraud, and you're not breaking any other laws other than you have broken the law and come here illegally, technically speaking, you are not supposed to get any type of direct federal benefit. Now, there are some exceptions to this. If you go to a hospital, you cannot be denied service. And there's actually several things like this which are exceptions to this rule. So there are direct benefits that actually do go to illegals, even though they're not supposed to get them. But the biggest problem here is indirect benefits. So if you come here as an illegal and you have a child, or you bring children with you, they do qualify for an extensive amount of direct benefit programs. Now, when I'm talking about all this, I'm putting in perspective of cost. I'm not saying that we should allow the children of illegal immigrants to starve to death. These are human beings that we're talking about, and it's important to keep that perspective. But, and we'll get to the but later on, there are buts to this, and that's why this is so important. So the average fiscal net burden of each illegal household, as it stands now, and it's actually probably a little bit north of this, but we don't have the data, so we can't quantify exactly. But as of 2010, based on those numbers from the census and based on CBO scoring and based on modeling from the National Academy of Sciences, the average net household burden is $14,387. That's not every household, that's average. So some households will probably be net contributors, some probably have a much larger burden than that in services and programs that they use. Now, understand that this is after you factor in the taxes that they're paying as well. So they're paying taxes indirectly because they're illegal, they don't pay all the taxes. But indirectly they're paying quite a few taxes. But they're also using an enormous amount of resources and programs, which offsets it to the tune to each household by $14,387. That's a huge burden to the taxpayer every year. It costs us roughly $50 billion to pay for that every single year. Now then, here's the problem if we pass amnesty. But first, let's define amnesty. What is amnesty? Amnesty, in my opinion, is so that there's the textbook definition. There's absolving someone of their crimes, not punishing someone for their crime. So some on the other side of this argument would argue that, well, they're going to pay a fine, therefore they have to jump through all these legal loopholes, so it's not amnesty because they're not getting away with it. So there's that argument. The problem with that argument is it just doesn't stand up to reason. If you look at it from an objective, logical standpoint, it's actually worse than amnesty. Because in amnesty, they come here and do something illegally, and then they don't get punished for it. But that's predicated on that they don't actually get what they did. They don't benefit by getting to stay here. So if I were to take your cell phone from you, and then amnesty would be that I have to give your cell phone back, but I'm not going to get in trouble. That would be amnesty. What the corollary here of what they're asking for is, if I steal your cell phone, and then I get caught, I have to pay you $1, but I get to keep your phone. It's a $300 iPhone, I get to keep that $300 iPhone. They're saying that that's not amnesty. And maybe it's technically not, but it's worse than amnesty. It's amnesty plus, because they're benefiting from their illegal action enormously. And I'll explain to you why. And if an illegal household gets granted a pathway to a legal status, maybe it's a guest worker program, maybe it's a lawful permanent residence, maybe it's a temporary visa, this puts them on a path. And by the way, anyone who argues otherwise does not understand the legislative process or the political sentiments of this nation right now. Once you are on a legal pathway, and this could be a guest worker program, this could be a temporary visa status, this could be a lawful permanent resident status, they will, whether through the courts or through follow-on legislation, they will qualify for direct benefits. So what happens when you qualify for direct benefits as an illegal household? It happens quite a bit. It actually doubles the yearly household burden from $14,387 per household to about, and this depends on if you want to factor in pre-recession modeling or post-recession modeling, but it jumps from about $27,500 to $29,500, doubles their yearly net burden. So what happens is if we grant a legal status and amnesty goes through, they are going to benefit from their legal action by gaining twice as much access to federal benefits and programs on average. Now, why does this jump so high? The reason is because if you look at, and we've got all this data, I've got a mountain of data actually on this handout over here, you can grab one later, but we break it down by looking at educational attainment. The vast majority of illegal aliens here do not have a high school education or no high school at all. And so, what are the economic job prospects of someone who speaks very little English or not at all and has very little skills and training and very little education? We can extrapolate that by looking at Americans, citizens, with the same type of demographic background, educational attainment. We can look at legal citizens, because we have all the hard data on legal citizens and American citizens and their economic attainment and their social mobility and economic mobility data. And then we can kind of compare and contrast and look at that. And it gives us a really good a look at what happens. And at the end of the day, they double their net burden on the taxpayers. That is something we simply cannot afford. It would essentially add upwards of 6.3 plus trillion to our national debt. That is unsustainable. That is, and by the way, that is a conservative estimate. If you want to factor in a whole bunch of other variables, which we didn't because it would have clouded our analysis and made it easier to attack, but which I think are actually valid points, it's actually north of that. The debt burden on this would be far north of 6.3 trillion, but we can't quantify some of these arguments we're making, so we stuck with the conservative estimate. We can't afford that. That bumps it up to about 102 billion a year on our budget costs, just the net burden from illegals alone. This has nothing to do with defense spending, this has nothing to do with Medicare, Medicaid, all of these other things. So we simply cannot afford it. Now that's a utilitarian argument that I just made. Some will say, these are human beings, it's about more than that. Well, it is. It absolutely is about more than just dollars. It's about more than data. It's about more than intellectual and academic arguments. These are human beings. But it's also a rule of law argument. We have laws in this nation. What type of citizen is someone going to make when their very first action on our soil is to break federal law? What precedent does that set? What expectation do we have of them to become, in the aggregate, the type of citizens that could sustain liberty, that could sustain civil society, that could sustain all of these hallmarks and important cultural trademarks of a free society? I don't think that it's very promising at all. Now, I fully support legal immigration. Some people are against, they want to reduce. I'm actually all for legal immigration. I think that if you are a highly skilled person with a great education, you want to come here and create a business, employ people, add to the economy, I think that's a fantastic thing. But I have a zero tolerance policy for illegal immigration, and I'm 100% opposed to amnesty of any kind. Now, what's going on our southern border right now? I'm sure a lot of you have been following. It's chaos. We have what I would consider a humanitarian crisis occurring, and it's not just on our soil, it's happening all up and down the South and Central American corridor leading up here, where we have people from South America coming here on long, dangerous treks. A lot of these are small children traveling thousands of miles to get here under the illusion that well, it may not be illusion, but under the promise that they're going to have amnesty. They're going to be able to get all these free benefits, that they're going to be able to stay here for indefinitely, and that they will kind of prosper from our civil society and what we build here. This is being fed by those who are supporting immigration reform. Now, I will be the first person here to tell you that we need immigration reform. There's a lot of problems with our immigration system. There's a lot of problems with all sorts of aspects of it. But the problem is that we have a lot of laws in the books that are good, that are absolutely not being enforced. And so what we at Heritage Action, and a lot of other conservatives are kind of pointing to is that we need border security, and that needs to be our only argument right now. And so some people have said, well, why don't we propose legislation on that right now? Why don't we put forward a border security bill and have Congress vote on that right now? The problem with that would be that even if you let me write my ideal border security bill, and I just think it's the best thing ever, because I wrote it and I'm 100% awesome at everything immigration. I'm joking, I'm not. But if I had the utmost confidence in this bill and just thought it was the greatest bill ever written, I would not want that to go to the floor for a vote. And here's why. Because if that bill went for a vote, let's say miraculously it passes in the current form that I wrote it in, which is very unlikely. There would probably be markups and amendments from people kind of on the establishment side or the moderate side of the Republican Party. There might even be some Democrats that are allowed to get their amendments passed through. But let's say none of that happens. It would then go to the Senate. This is where Harry Reid would mark this thing up. It would resemble at least the Gang of Eight bill, which was an amnesty bill, if not worse. It would come back to us in that form, or it would go to a conference committee. So let's say it goes to a conference committee. John Boehner, who we know wants immigration reform now, which I think is irresponsible. He would probably, and by the way, he is pro-amnesty to some respects. He would probably deny that and say he's for legal status if they pay a fine. And let me back up here, and like I was telling earlier, this is the circular logic I was getting into. When you pay a fine, you're not really being punished. What you're doing is you're getting a buy-in to a fantastic federal benefits package. If you pay $5,000 and you're benefiting then at $29,500 a year, well, sign me up for that. Where a one-time $5,000 fee for that type of benefits every single year, that's awesome. So that is not punishment. I wouldn't do this because I'm a moral person, but some people would beg, borrow, and steal to come up with $5,000 to get enrolled in that program. So the idea that a fine is punishment and they have to jump through legal loopholes, that's why it's not amnesty, that's just malarkey. It absolutely is amnesty. They're benefiting from it greatly. We're basically giving them what they want, and then we're also paying them to give them what they want. So anyways, back this up. If this goes to a conference committee, John Boehner would likely appoint a lot of people who are very pro-amnesty. So it would come back to the House very different. Now, maybe we could shoot that down, maybe not. Same thing with the Senate bill. If it went straight to the House floor, maybe we could shoot that down, maybe we wouldn't. But let's say that John Boehner did the right thing, and he said, we're not going to bring this to the floor for a vote. Nancy Pelosi could then call for a discharge petition. And what that means is that you could bypass John Boehner and Republican leadership and bring it straight to the floor vote if you have something around like probably 10 or 20 Republicans that will support it. You get enough votes, and by the way, there are 10 to 20 Republicans out there who would absolutely do this. The absolute worst immigration bill you could possibly fathom, well maybe not the worst, but a really bad bill, would definitely make it back to the House, and with the right prodding, it would make it to the House floor, and conservatives would be utterly helpless to do anything to stop it. So this is why, when we're talking about immigration reform, we don't want them to do anything yet. And that doesn't mean there aren't problems and they don't need solutions, but we don't want the federal government to do anything legislatively. We want them to enforce the existing law. We want them to put pressure on President Obama to enforce the existing law. Now, ideally, we win in November. Now, what does that allow? That means we can, on paper, control the process. This gives us a much better play field at which we can start implementing border control. Now, what's causing the chaos on the southern border? It's the idea and the notion that they're going to get amnesty. They're being told, the media down in South and Central America is reporting this, they will get amnesty. There are pro-amnesty organizations that are actively encouraging groups down there to come up here and saying if you can just get to the border, you'll be fine, that they can't refuse you entry. So we have literally thousands of people now coming this way every day, coming this way, and this is being fueled by those who support anything other than border security. So it is absolutely, in my opinion, irresponsible to start talking about work visa programs, legal statuses, even if that's what you believe and support. It's, at this point, it is morally indefensible to be talking that way because it is actively encouraging human trafficking through narco-terrorists, children, sex trafficking. People are having to pay very dangerous people to get them here. This is not something that we want to put human beings into. Responsible immigration reform would include only talking about border security right now. Once we have that established, once we've actually certified that the border is secure, then we can have these other debates. But no one should be talking about legal statuses, even if that's something you believe, simply because of the situation it is now creating on the border. I blame this solely, what's going on the border, on the Obama administration and those in the Republican Party who are actively fomenting this notion that there is going to be comprehensive immigration reform. Even if they support that, and that's fine. From an academic standpoint, we can have disagreements on immigration reform. I don't fault them for that, I disagree with them. But from a moral level, we need to know when is the responsible time to have this conversation. It is not right now, not with what it's causing to happen on the border. So that is the kind of the data arguments, and then I've also kind of given you the point by point of what happens on the legislative side of things if we move forward on this. Now the good news is, the Washington Post, which is kind of a left-wing newspaper, so take this for what it's worth, today declared that immigration reform is dead until President Obama leaves office. And I think that's probably accurate. I think the conservatives have won this issue, and it's not that we won't try to pass border security bills once we gain majorities, but Obama will knock those things down. Does that mean that there's going to be a lot of problems in the meantime? Yes, there's going to be problems with the border. Those that disagree with me will say, well, we have to do something. That is a reaction to a problem that doesn't necessarily follow through that logic. Doing something is not inherently a good thing. Sometimes an action is a bad thing. And sometimes doing something can be worse than what we're actually looking at right now. So if we're going to do something, we need to take a look at it and say, does this actually advance the issue? Does this improve the situation? And unfortunately, doing something right now in this climate with the Obama administration, with Harry Reid controlling the Senate, I don't see how it's going to be a positive thing. I think that the only thing that we should be asking is the president to enforce the laws. So that's my opinion, and I think that some of you might disagree on that. I'm going to kind of open it up for questions and arguments you've been hearing about immigration, and maybe there's something I didn't address here, and we can kind of push back on that. And it's okay if you disagree with me, by the way. Yes?
Are the laws, the current laws, sufficient to close the border and to manage it right now?
From the executive standpoint, I think that the laws are sufficient and that the president is tasked with securing the border. Even if it says the president is tasked with securing the border, from my perspective, from an enforcement standpoint, that's all you really need. So yes, I think that the president has full ability to basically shut down the borders to secure them. Now, is he going to? No. Does it mean that Congress may have to proactively write legislation that binds the president specifically to do this? Then probably. That's probably what it will take. It will take very specific legislation that the president can, if it were to pass, would probably ignore, like he's ignored a lot of other, and just refuse to enforce a lot of other laws. But interestingly enough, the Supreme Court's catching up. I think that today was the 12th Supreme Court finding that the president's actions were unconstitutional since he's been in office. It's 12, and that's just the ones that have gotten through that we could prove standing on. There's a laundry list of issues which we were very confident the president would be found violating the Constitution on if we could get standing to actually put them forward. Any other questions? Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but several years ago, a fence was voted on and agreed to. But the problem was is that Nancy Pelosi and her bunch defunded that fence.
Right.
Such as it was going to be. It
Right.
didn't work.
But by the way, the irony of that is awesome in that, remember during the Defund Obamacare tour, and even a lot of Republicans were saying that you can't defund Obamacare, and yet they defund things all the time. You absolutely can defund things. So,
My question though was,
Right.
to get to it, was that, is there any way since it was agreed to, it was voted on, and it was approved and voted into law, why can't the citizens of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California just go ahead and build that stinking fence?
right, so, let me finish the thought here before you
All right.
run me off here, because I'm going to say something you may not agree with, but let me get to the point because I think you will agree.
Okay.
Immigration is fundamentally a federal issue in the Constitution. It's an express power of the federal government. That being said, I absolutely do agree that the state should be doing something. The problem is that it's very expensive. And the federal government has done a really good job of funneling money away from states and then giving it back to them to tell them what to do with it. I think states have to start unilaterally acting on these issues, and that's not just on immigration, on a lot of things. I support the doctrine of interposition, where it's not necessarily nullification, and that states recognize that a federal law is a law, but they say it's violating the rights of our citizens, and therefore we're not going to allow you to enforce this, or we're going to protect our citizens. In this case, it would be the states just using interposition and to go down on the border and enforce a law that the government is not enforcing. And I'm not even sure if that would be interposition logic, but on other issues like healthcare or a lot of state power issues where these things are powers that have been reserved for the states, I think states absolutely have to start standing up. And then we don't really get involved at the state level because we're a federal organization, and we think it's improper for a DC-based organization to come in and tell states at the local level how to run the show. So we focus on federal issues only. But I certainly, personally, would love to see the state of Texas stand up and start taking on some of these things. But the big thing here is funding. Where are we going to get the money to go down to the border? And I think that's where a lot of the the stickiness on this debate about opening up, do we want a special session down in Austin to discuss this? And if so, where are we going to get the money to pay for it? I don't know. I don't have those answers. But hopefully...
There's a lot of wealthy people in Texas.
I think if you ask the people of Texas, they might just stand up and fund it.
We're already doing
right.
it.
Right, absolutely.
We're already doing it. We're sending 1.7 million a week for the DPS on the border.
Right.
That started last week, so we're already doing something.
Right, no, absolutely. They've taken initial steps, but absolutely shutting down the border, that's going to be a lot more expensive. And those are the conversations we need to have at the local level with our state reps and state senators and say, what are we willing and, what are we willing to do? Yes?
And I think they got all kinds of blowback, like some endangered frog couldn't get across to his
Right.
place or something.
And by the way, did you see that the EPA just yesterday said that they lost their emails now as well? Yeah. So we're challenging them on some issues, and all of a sudden their hard drives have crashed as well.
That's because they were doing the...
All hard drives will crash.
Right.
You want to see the emails.
Yeah.
Was there a question over here, by the way?
I just had a question because you were talking about Nancy Pelosi and the function she took in the House. Can McConnell do the same thing in the Senate for those type of things?
There's no discharge petition in the Senate. So I don't think so. And it's very unlikely that the Senate would pass anything that the House put out there, especially if it was a good bill. So I don't think there's not necessarily a danger of something passing the House and then getting passed in the Senate. I think where we have danger, well, there is if it's a bad bill. But if it's a good bill, there's no danger of that. The danger is if you put forward a good bill, it's going to come back in a very bad form, and then there are House procedures to manipulate that and basically pass really bad legislation in a manner in which conservatives can't stop it. And that is what we want to avoid. You know, there's a lot of calls for compromise. There's a lot of calls for bipartisanship on this issue. Again, but a lot of people have a very kind of juvenile opinion of what compromise is. There's this viewpoint that compromise and bipartisanship, they have inherently good meanings. Compromise is not inherently a good thing. It's neutral. Compromise can be a very bad thing. And the example I use in this case is, you know, let's say Democrats want to build a bridge across the Grand Canyon and Republicans don't. Well, some would argue that compromise on that is to build the bridge halfway. That is not advancing the issue. We're still wasting a lot of money. We don't get the utility of the bridge. And unfortunately, to a large degree, this is the way the Republican Party in recent years has been kind of operating, in that we need to compromise and govern instead of painting in bold colors and being very out there and distinguishing the difference between progressivism and conservatism. They want to pander to the elusive middle 1 or 2% that may be swayable in an election. And in the course of doing so, there are some people who may retain their power. They may stay in D.C., but it's at the behest, to the detriment of the American taxpayer, because we're not actually fundamentally solving any problems. You know, there's going to be some changes in the House and Senate and who's in control, but if we go along this path and we keep doing this tug of war without actually fighting for anything, we're not really gaining any ground. And unfortunately, immigration is one of those issues where they're using the compromise rhetoric and the bipartisanship rhetoric, which is really just empty, because at the end of the day, we're going to compromise and we're going to be in a worse position because of it. If we're going to compromise, there needs to be, both sides need to move forward. Now, I actually don't care if the left moves forward, but from a definitional standpoint, compromise should benefit both parties. Compromise on these issues does not benefit the Republican Party. And until we start being very bold and putting forward a reform agenda, I'll use this example, the Export-Import Bank. This is a bank that that basically takes taxpayer money and then gives it to corporations to fund their exports to foreign nations. It costs us about $2 billion, so we're basically paying for huge multinational corporations' exports. Their argument is that this creates jobs and protects jobs and all these things. The problem is that they're not finishing out that algorithm. The equation is missing a variable. So I'll give you a great example. Air India works with Boeing to secure Export-Import Bank financing so that Air India can buy Boeing planes. So Boeing's going to say, hey, we're selling billions of dollars of planes, this creates jobs in these plants. The problem is that Air India competes against United Airlines. United Airlines is a domestic airline. It's putting United Airlines at a competitive disadvantage. United Airlines says it's cost them about 7,500 jobs. So even if you're creating jobs at Boeing, you're losing jobs at United. It's a wash. In fact, the CBO has said it doesn't create any jobs. So at best, it's a wash. So right now we have very well-funded interests like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which, by the way, there's a lot of good local chambers of commerce, and I work with a lot of them, and they really stand up for small businesses. But my opinion is the Chamber of Commerce at the national level has kind of gone off the path. They're supporting a lot of big government initiatives because at the end of the day, it helps their lobbyists and helps their special interests. The Export-Import Bank is a great example. They're throwing a lot of money behind this. And by the way, it's a very partisan organization. $3 out of every 4 goes to a Democrat district. So our tax dollars go to fund Democrat districts. There's no parity there. There's a lot of scandals and corruption charges actually working their way through the courts right now. So this is something that we really want to push back against and try to convince them to vote against it. And last time it got reauthorized, we only got 93 conservatives. We think that we're going to get a lot further on this, specifically because Kevin McCarthy, the new majority leader, has already said that he supports ending it. The House Financial Services Chairman, Jeb Hensarling, who's here in Texas, he is very adamant against it. We have Steve Scalise, who is the new whip, who is against it. So there's a lot going for us. on this. The problem is just not enough, not fast enough. And if we can't defeat corporate welfare and cronyism like the Export-Import Bank, we have no chance at tackling Social Security reforms, Medicare reforms, Medicaid reforms, the 126 federal welfare programs that are out there. Because if we can't stop a corporate welfare entity from operating, we have no chance with these programs that help millions of individuals or subsidize millions of individuals. The outcry from voters will be so great, and they will just collapse. So, and this is what we ran into when Paul Ryan a few years ago tried to tackle Medicare and Medicaid. They had videos of him, campaign videos, not him, but it was someone who looked like him, pushing an old lady off a cliff. And Republicans essentially backed down from that fight. They did not want to tackle that because the rhetoric used against them was just so severe. So on a whole host of issues, whether it's immigration, whether it's the Export-Import Bank, whether it's Obamacare, whether it's entitlement and welfare reform, we really need to support a bold agenda and people not afraid to stand up and say what's right. Without that, we're just treading water and we're just losing at a slightly slower pace. Yes?
I think it takes one good man, like Ronald Reagan, and I believe there's one out there.
I agree.
And I believe this United States is going to stand and not fall.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a Marine. I don't accept loss, but nevertheless, we have a big problem ahead of us that we're going to have to overcome. We can absolutely do it. And I, hopefully I will live a very long time, and I will spend an enormous amount of that time fighting back against that problem.
So in Texas, or on the state level, I love heritage. Is there a heritage type?
Some of the organizations that I look at, it's not a perfect comparison, but Empower Texans, TPPA, there's some good state level think tanks and organizations that kind of fight on the conservative / little L libertarian liberty type issues. I know some of the staffers at both TPPA and
so they give
Empower
out
Texans.
information, like when I get your newsletter, I know that it's going to be accurate, it's going to be fair, and it's backed up.
I can't vouch for the accuracy of anyone else, but I do rely on information from Empower Texans and TPPA quite a bit.
With lots of data too. That's
right.
another thing I'd like to see in a group. Is lots of data. Okay, and of course I'm a strong Tea Party, but it's not the same entity. It's not. So the other question I had is, do you know of any organizations that are any groups that are really pushing for the ratification of the Constitution on the states by state?
You mean like Article 5 stuff?
What's the question?
The question was, are there any entities that are pushing the Article 5 issue? There are quite a few. I mean, Mark Levin's pretty big on this. There's a lot of Tea Parties are pushing this issue. My opinion on this, since it deals with federal, is that at the very least, it's a great thing if so in order to go forward with this, we need 38 conservative state legislatures, not just Republican, conservative state legislatures. We're nowhere near that. We have a lot of work to do. I like the idea of pushing for this and positioning ourselves for this just in case we need it. At the very worst, we have 38 conservative state legislatures, which are doing a lot to fix the problems anyways. At the very best, they're in place at the right time where we need them, because at the federal level, it's just gone so far off that there's really the path there is more painful than just going to something like that. So I'm supportive of it, but I like to temper that with, there are a lot of practical realities, and we're nowhere near a position where we can actually utilize that. We need to get there, and that's going to take years, unfortunately.
Mark Levine has a book that explains this, from A to Z.
Right, I love Mark Levine. I listen to him every day, and if I miss his show, I listen to the podcast. But yes, Liberty Amendments.
Yes.
I'm looking at your scorecard here.
Yes.
And I see that Eric Campton has a 61.
Right.
And I see that Kevin McCarthy is a 46.
Correct.
So how did the conservatives get outflanked to get somebody who is not as conservative as the guy that they just got rid of?
So, this is a House leadership issue, which is not something we directly deal with. So let me say this is my personal opinion. I think that what happened is that of the several conservative options that were being looked at, none of them thought that this was the time to step forward. Now, they may be thinking that let's wait until after November. We're going to have to retool, and there might be a new speaker's race, and then things get shaken up anyways. I don't know. I'm not in their heads. I can't think. I don't know. The rumors I've heard, Jim Jordan, Jeb Hensarling, I personally think that they would have both been fantastic majority leaders. They're both solid conservatives. They just didn't feel that now is the time. And there's other people. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that I really like. Jim Bryden signed up in Oklahoma, Trey Gowdy. There's a lot of people out there that do a good job. They just didn't step forward. Now, the bad news is that there's not really been an ideological shift in leadership. In fact, if you look at the whip team that was just announced today, these are the people who are going to work for the majority whip, which is Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise was the president of the Republican Study Committee, which was or is the conservative wing of the House Republican Party. Every single person he put in place that he announced as part of his team, not one person had over 70%. In fact, most of them were in the low 60s and 50s. So this is a problem in that we have a growing conservative movement, populist movement, like the Tea Parties, constitutional groups, 9/12 groups. It's a massive movement. Things are moving in that direction on a whole host of issues. For instance, the Export-Import Bank, we're seeing way more support. A lot of members of Congress are starting to get it. The food stamp and farm bill was split up for the very first time ever. Now, ultimately, we didn't win that one, but we moved it in the right direction further than it's ever gone before. A lot of things are happening that we never thought 2 years ago would have been possible. For instance, we stopped immigration reform. If you would have asked us if we would have been able to do it not in this climate 2 years ago, I probably would have said that that's not going to happen. The problem is that I think that House leadership is lagging behind understanding where the Republican Party is. And I think that there's been a fundamental transformation, not necessarily amongst us. I think that this has been out there for years. We're just now starting to, and I think I will give credit to organizations like Heritage Action, and that we're now we aid Tea Party groups in exposing why this is. So we give them specific data, and I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of the activists I work with that kind of illuminates why we have these problems. Like, for instance, 3 years ago, no one, well, very few, so a lot of people here might, but the average person would have had no idea what a cloture vote was, or a motion to proceed vote. And some of us may be still a little fuzzy on what those things are, but we've heard of them now. A lot of us have heard of them now, and we understand that they're used to mask and play the game. So we might have someone voting against the bill on the motion to proceed vote, but when they're safe on the backside, they vote for it. It's a purely political stunt. It placates their voters back home. They get permission from leadership, so that, especially if they're in a tight race. But we expose these types of things and show people what's going on behind the scenes. And I think that it's a continual effort of this conversation back and forth, that we know what's going on in DC. We want to communicate that information and data to you, not tell you what to think, but just give you the information, and you will put it together nicely. And because it's just very obvious and very clear. And if I graduated magna cum laude in political science. I've had a lot of internships. I've done a lot of reading on political issues for a long time. I'm 36, and I've been, doing this political stuff nonstop for about 16 years. Even when I was in the Marine Corps, I was in the infantry. Even when we were out in the field, I had political books and philosophy books in my pack because there's nothing to do if you're not patrolling and you're not sleepy. So I would just read, and I've learned more in the last year and a half on these Heritage Action 15-minute phone calls on Mondays than I ever learned. With the exception of maybe a few philosophy classes that I really benefited greatly from, that helped me kind of shape my understanding of political thought and human nature and things like that. But understanding how DC works and understanding what's going on there and why, and understanding that when your member of Congress is telling you something, it may not be a lie, but it's also not the whole truth. And that's not any specific individual, but it's a trend that I see quite a bit of. Unfortunately, in the home districts, we're just not getting the whole story on issues, or we just get incorrect arguments. And we have a team of almost 300 employees at Heritage. and then the 30 or so staff at Heritage Action that really work hard to make sure that those opinions and the counter arguments are out there and in the right hands. And the other thing is, and I'll kind of wrap it up on this because I'm probably running out of time. The other thing is that the Tea Party is winning. You may not see it every day. You may not understand it. You may be very frustrated from time to time when things aren't going correctly. But I see, because I cover an entire region, and I cover a lot of districts, and I communicate daily with activists all over the country. The Tea Party is winning. The conservative movement is winning. The problem is that we don't see it necessarily on a daily basis because we don't yet control the party. We are a majority of the conservative thought is a majority of the Republican Party right now. It's just not in control. And the reason this is, along with other organizations, is that we now have a 24-hour news cycle. We have social media. We have Facebook. The communication speed is so quick on these things. And so, for instance, when John Cornyn voted the wrong way on I think it was maybe it was the immigration bill, I can't remember now. He voted for the motion to proceed vote, for the motion to proceed vote, which means, yeah, it might have been Obamacare. I know that he voted the wrong way on one of the amnesty motion proceeds and then also Obamacare. So he voted to proceed the bill forward, meaning he supported it advancing, where we actually had a better chance killing the bill on the MTP vote, motion to proceed vote, but he voted for it, and then on the back end he voted against it. So he voted the right way on the back end. He voted the motion to proceed, so he didn't get any credit for that. I knew the second that he voted on this motion to proceed vote, and by the way, he actually does pretty good on our scorecard. He's just been wrong on some very big issues, some very public issues. But I knew as soon as he voted for this motion to proceed, that in about an hour on social media, he was going to be bragging about how he voted against this bill and that this is just a terrible thing. So I got out there and I worked with tons of activists saying, you know, before he voted on that final vote, to just really crush him on Facebook. And within about an hour, there was almost 2,800 comments on his Facebook page crushing him on his motion to proceed vote. It completely neutered his ability on the back end to take credit for voting against Obamacare.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was really great. And this is something that 5, 10 years ago, without social media, without the organizations out there doing kind of what we do, without organized conservative activists in groups like this never would have been accomplished, and the average person would have thought that that was a great vote. My dad is not political at all, and even he was calling me up and saying, you know, why did he vote for that motion to proceed vote? When my dad knows what a motion to proceed vote is, that means that the American people are starting to get it. And by the way, my dad's not a dumb person, he's just not political at all. He's a physics teacher, and he's got a master's, and was an aerospace engineer, and all this stuff, but he's not political at all.
Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Tulsa. I was raised in Kansas. My dad was an engineer at Boeing. I went to the Marine Corps, did 3 deployments to Iraq. Then I moved straight out here because my sister moved here. Her husband was in the Marine Corps out at the Fort Worth JRV base. And I haven't left since. And one of the reasons I came straight here is because I just like the attitude of Texas. And there's nothing against Kansas, nothing against Oklahoma. I love those states. I've got a lot of family in those states. But there's something about the mentality of Texas patriots. It's just, you don't see it in the Midwest. You know, people in Kansas, and I love Kansas, I love my Jayhawk basketball team up there. But people in Kansas, they consider themselves United States citizens and then Kansans. Texans consider themselves United States citizens as well as Texans on the same even platform. And some even consider themselves Texans above United States citizens. And frankly, I think that that's the mentality that the United States as a whole needs to have. I think that more people have that kind of a mentality, we wouldn't have the problems we're in. And so I figured that this is kind of the last stand. If Texas goes, we're done. I mean, there's no way to fix the United States if we lose Texas. Yes.
In this Tea Party meeting here tonight, you're about the youngest person here. What happens to more young people in the Tea Party to come?
Great question. So, I run into this question a lot. And fortunately, I don't think that the answer is necessarily bad. I think, so, I'm 36, so I'm a little bit closer to remembering what it was like to be 20 and 21 and 22. One thing that a lot of us in this room have the benefit of is we're not changing diapers. We're not raising kids. We're not taking kids to soccer practice. We're not trying to find our first job. We're not in college more concerned about girls and boys than the national debt. So I think that younger people have a lot of distractions, and it's not until, unfortunately, I think it's not until they get to the 30s age range where they start understanding that that weird thing that on my paycheck is directly attributable to what the government is doing. And that if I want more money, I can get involved. And by the way, schools are teaching Common Core and teaching socialist ideology, and my kids are going to be going to that. That can't happen. So I think that the good news is I run into a lot of conservative young people, a lot of people who are pro-Constitution young people, and they firmly believe it, they firmly support it. But I'll tell you what, getting them to go knock on a door, not going to happen. Especially not when that girl is texting them or just sent them a Facebook message about going to see that movie tomorrow night. Now, I'm being unfair to some young people because some young people absolutely bust their butt for the conservative movement. But I think it's just human nature. I don't think it's abnormal. I think it's always going to be a problem for conservatism and political groups, by and large, that young people just have other things that they want to be doing. And they don't understand yet how important it is. Yes.
I was just wondering, is there anything we can do about the anchor baby issue? Can we change wherever that came from?
Right. So I absolutely think that we should. I think that has to be an issue. If we're talking about fundamental immigration reform, I think that we need to address that. I think that is, ever since the 14th Amendment passed, it's a little bit trickier of an issue. But I would say that if you're using founder's logic before that, and by the way, the 14th Amendment by and large has a lot of good things in it. So I'm not saying that we need to repeal the 14th Amendment. Please don't, misquote me there. But I do like the idea that if you're going to be a citizen of this country, you need to be here legally. You need to be, your birth here needs to be under legitimate legal circumstances. If you're a legal immigrant, you're not yet a citizen, I'm okay with that. As long as you have a legal status, you're here for the right reasons. But maybe you disagree on elements of that, maybe you think you should only be citizens, and that's fine. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I absolutely agree that part of immigration reform long-term needs to be to address that problem.